Opendoor has lied. They had a business model that they thought was going to absolutely crush it in every single type of market out there. And the reality is they can only function and create profit in an up market. And to be honest with you, even in an up market, they were losing billions of dollars of investors' money year after year. They're the worst house flippers ever. And I want to jump into this data with you and explore how you can avoid making the same mistakes as Opendoor in your business model if you're a house flipper, or if you want to understand why this business model is so bad and how that doesn't add any real value to consumers and actually charges you way more than you could possibly imagine in all of these additional add-on fees and renegotiations. If you're considering Opendoor, watch this video and get the full scoop from insiders who have been tracking Opendoor since they started in our market in February of 2022. Let's dig in. Brittany, this is a chart of Opendoor stock, and it's absolutely crazy. Opendoor came into Jacksonville, Florida in 2019 and many other markets, and the stock just absolutely exploded during the pandemic timeframe from 2020 to 2021. The stock got all the way up to $30, and then for many years after that, their business model couldn't find a way, even though they charged so much money to sellers, to flip their property. You're selling your house to Wall Street to flip their property. Their stock went all the way down to $1, and they're at risk of being delisted. If their stock gets below $1 for a long enough period of time, they will get delisted from the NASDAQ. Fortunately for Opendoor, they have had this crazy frenzy on Reddit with the retail traders driving up the price of the stock because they wanted to do basically a short squeeze for all these people who were shorting Opendoor stock. They wanted to basically push those people and punish the people who are shorting that company, even though the company really doesn't provide much value at all. That's my personal opinion, and this is not financial advice. But this was a SPAC that was originally created by Chamath Palihapitiya. You might have heard of him on the All In podcast, and he had this go public in 2020 and got cashed in on basically up to a $35 billion valuation. So let's get into why this company sucks and how many people are betting against it. So this is the open position of shorts, Brittany, over a period of time, and it was basically a meme stock, just like you'd think GameStop a couple of years ago, and they made a movie out of it. But basically, they squeezed the stock all the way from $2 back up to $5, and now it's trading back around $2 today. And that's because, again, they had basically 22% of all shares were sold short and being held short. Here's
Wow.
billions of dollars that they've been losing annually. Okay, this is from 2020 to 2025. I mean, it is some crazy numbers. They've never made money flipping houses. And if you're a house flipper, I mean, you could not sustain this. They're only using Wall Street's money to basically buy up market share and basically fail at flipping properties. So, Brittany, back in the day, we were really terrified of Opendoor, right? Tell me about your
We were.
experience on the ground, being one of the top agents and then now being the top broker in Northeast Florida. What was so scary about Opendoor?
Yeah, so all of the hype was around Opendoor, right? So we saw the stock price take a peak in that late 2020, 2021. And it was in every conversation with any client, buyers and sellers. You had buyers that were just ditching their real estate agents to go pursue Opendoor houses. All the real estate agents were like, we need to warn you about these houses. Are you aware that these are flips? We have no idea about the information. Like, you've got no one representing you to look into all of this information as the experts to say, okay, was this a serious rehab property? Did they put lipstick on a pig? What are you buying? And then from the seller side, they were getting cash offers in their mailbox left and right. So of course it was the flashy thing to do. It was during a period of panic and fear around the real estate industry and the options that were available. And the entire real estate market, if you were agents, brokerages, we were scared. They were flocking in very quickly. It felt like it was doomsday with Redfin, Opendoor, and alternative options that were peaking in the marketplace. And eventually everybody survived. And now we're seeing all those stocks go to nothing, people being desperate to get any opportunity they can. And Open Door is not the saving grace. They're not Jesus coming to save everybody.
Yeah, Opendoor is not coming to save you. They're a Wall
Yes.
Street flipper, and their whole purpose of existing is to make money off of uneducated sellers who don't
Yes.
understand market value.
To
So,
suck up as much as they possibly can. They're a business at the end of the day, and they're going to pursue any opportunity to take money away from the consumer and the seller, which is
right.
mainly the seller, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're trying to find sellers. They're basically trying to find the dumbest seller out there that will sell their house for the lowest price possible. And by the way, there's a lot of wholesalers who do that, but there's wholesalers who actually add value to a neighborhood and the house is totally distressed. This is not what Open Door is doing. They're buying retail houses near retail prices and charging sometimes 12 to 15% in commissions and fees, plus like renegotiating all the way down the line and then trying to flip your house and make a couple percentage on it. Never worked, obviously. You've seen the chart of the net income. This is the
Correct.
chart that we put together using data that we had internally, data that we've collected on for sale by owner and iBuyers like Open Door. So this is the service fee. Those are the days on market. So momentum agents, generally charge between 5 or 6%, days on market 32%, 32 days. And the net to seller is generally 91.2% of the list price. Okay. And yes, you do have to negotiate repairs. I know this was a thing, Open Door is supposed to make things more convenient for you. No, they negotiate repairs just like everybody else, because when they make their original offer, they still have to send somebody out there to make sure that the condition is what you say it is. They really
Mm-hmm.
need to verify that you don't have anything weird going on with the house that you're trying not to disclose. The average agent was selling in 64 days, double the days on market. Our agents at Momentum Realty, by the way, if you need a top real estate agent in, across the United States, we're connected with the top of the top in basically every city and state. So if you need a contact, definitely reach out to us. My email's in the notes. But they're selling it for twice as long, and the net to seller is lower by about 50 basis points. Now, for sale by owner, a lot of people go for sale by owner. I understand they don't want to pay commission. The reality is it's really hard to do that on your own. The average percentage of net to seller is between 76% to 88%. That's just because people don't understand where the market is at unless you're in the market every single day. They don't understand what the consumer is looking for, what is sticking out right now, how to price it correctly. Do you do it 0.99? Do you do the full number? There's which day of the week do I list my property on? How do I generate hype on the property before it's listed? All of these are so important for you, and that's why they sell for a lot less. And then there's the iBuyers, right? There wasn't just Open Door. There was Zillow. There was Redfin. Even Keller Williams had Keller offers, and they
Mm-hmm.
would charge you service fees of 6 to 14%, and then they would make you believe that your net to seller would be about 85%. So they were trying to make about 15% on each property, and then they would have obviously closing costs the first time around, and then closing costs again when they sell it. And they're about 6.2% less than if you sold for us. So not only do we cover our cost, we're also saving our sellers an additional 6.2%. I mean, if you think about that on a $400,000 house, that's 24,000, it's a lot of money that we're talking about here. This is not a small amount of money, and this is the money that Wall Street is trying to squeeze from these sellers by making it more convenient through a cash offer. A lot of times we find that local wholesalers can actually get better prices than these online iBuyers because they understand exactly what the market needs and what they can actually pay for the property.
Yeah, let's be clear here. They're targeting two things about the consumer. Number one, you are desperate for cash. You see that offer, it is so clearly written on a piece of paper. Your offer is this. But that's just the beginning offer. And they know that once they trap you into the process and you feel like you can't get out of it because you don't know your rights, you haven't been educated about the process or maybe the contract requirements. And it's a little bit scary to be facing this big, Wall Street backed company versus one consumer, right? So they're preying on the fact that you need the cash. And then they're preying on the fact that you're not going to go do your research to see that there are alternative options to you to get cash offers. Like we just talked about, there are wholesalers in the community that will go, and yes, they're going to collect a spread, but they're going to get you most likely more money than you may have gotten through some of these companies. So they're preying on either ignorance or not being able to research options, and then the feeling of entrapment that you won't fight them to get out of it.
Yeah, and the cool thing I like about the wholesalers locally is, and I know a lot of them, we work with a lot of them. Some wholesalers are at our company. They usually just tell the seller the truth. They're like, I can
Hmm.
list it for you at this price. I can do it, we can try to, you can try to sell it on your own. You're probably going to get around this. If you need the cash today, I can buy it for this and give you the cash. And they're just giving all of the options available. No, iBuyers just want to buy it at the lowest price possible and negotiate with you every little step along the way, which is something that's very frustrating for the sellers because, again, the idea of this is it's supposed to be more convenient. You don't have to have showings on your house, right? A lot of people hate that showing experience because you're basically, you're looking at the average agent, 64 days. You have your front door wide open for 64 days. You got to hop out of your house to have somebody else you don't know walk through your house and give you feedback about every little part of it. It is a
It's a
frustrating
lot.
process. We know it is very stressful, and it's an expensive process too because there's a lot of moving parts plus closing costs. So we get it. But the reality is Opendoor is not the solution. And I would be honest with you if I thought it was. We were scared of this at first because it just picked up so much steam because by the time they closed on the house and their offer, the prices were already up 30 grand, which is
Yeah.
crazy to me. They still weren't making money during the peak years of the hottest real estate market ever in history, which is really concerning to me, and basically makes them one of the worst companies out there, worst home flipper of all time by far. Here was a Brooks Group ad. So me and Brittany used to be at Keller, is a great company. In 2019, iBuyers were going crazy. Why give Wall Street your money when you can go through more through local? I think this is really important for realtors to think about, for sellers to think about. When you work with a Wall Street backed company, even other real estate brokerages like Real or EXP or something like that, you're basically, that money flows through to Wall Street investors. Okay, so I just want to be clear on that. Yes, their agents own some of the stock, but the majority of it goes to Wall Street investors or to the founder. You can hire somebody local at a local brokerage like ours, Momentum Realty, owned by actual people who live here, and have the money flow through them versus trying to go through a Wall Street backed company. I do think, the kind of buy local thing has been missing, and I think it is really important if you want to support local entrepreneurs. But here's the ad that I used with my daughter, Evelyn. Sold my house cash to Fat Cat Wall Street investor, lost all my home equity, and then hired the Brooks Group, a seasoned pros. We had net 3.6% more than the average realtor and tens of thousands of dollars more than the cash offer. And we have way better solutions. We have way better tips on how to sell your house and how to maximize it. There were some circumstances we would get the open door offer and it would be $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 less than what we could actually sell the house for. So it's actually, we ran a lot of our properties through when we had listings through Opendoor just out of curiosity to see
Hmm.
what the price they would offer and then what we thought we could get for the house. And the difference was absolutely insane. So we were like, who is taking this offer? Britt, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, so it's like what we talked about yesterday. It's the people that are desperate for cash, but they don't realize that that initial offer is going to decrease once repairs are looked into, once certain vendor costs, title, different payoffs are going to be placed into the model for Open Door. So that first number is it's the shiny object for the person. It's to capture you in to then take advantage of you because their goal is to squeeze out every amount of profit, not for the seller, but for themselves. Where if you think about the opposite incentive, when you work with real estate agents versus an open door type company, they're incentivized through commission to get the seller the highest price possible, right?
Yeah.
Or even wholesalers. Can we get the highest price possible, make a bigger spread, things like that. So, and that's a person that you can talk to ask questions, to ask your options versus going into a black hole with an open door where you've signed the paperwork and boom, you're gone. There's no one that's going to be an advocate for you. And so it's clear that they were not the winning solution for the marketplace as seen through their stock and the value that they've provided.
Yeah, I don't think there is any value that they provided. So let's kind of look into this.
It was a quick gimmick and we
Yes.
get it. We were scared of it, but it didn't solve the problem for the consumer.
Well, it was market dependent, right? So it was completely dependent upon low interest rates, a fast appreciating market. And so if it's only dependent on low interest rates because the
Right.
holding costs are expensive, then it's a terrible business model. If a business model has to go is reliant on interest rates, then it's not a good business. So even Keller Williams wanted in on the action. So Keller Williams began buying and selling houses, right? Because if there's any new trend that comes up, these big players, they have to buck the trend. Otherwise, the agents will go somewhere else because agents love shiny objects. They'll go wherever they're presented something new that sounds really cool. And a lot of these new cool things end up actually blowing up and causing tons of lawsuits. And frankly, there's no moat around what Opendoor is doing, right? Because any large real estate player with a cash backing or can get cash
Mm-hmm.
backing can completely go in there and just do the exact same thing. I can do the exact same thing. I can raise capital and start competing with Opendoor. It's literally, the value is just providing a cash quick close solution which already exists. They're just doing it on a national scale, and every company basically wanted in on the action. So this is my thing. I think it's the Wall Street's attempt at being a home flipper, and it was the worst decision of all time for them to do it. The reality is that house flippers and speculators are the ones who cause bubbles. When we look at what happened in the 2006, 2007 timeframe, where you had people who were just speculating home prices and just buying up 3 or 4 homes sitting vacant, or trying to turn them into rentals, that triggered just this balloon effect that caused a crisis. It's no different than what just happened, right? Rates went to zero. Everybody wanted to buy real estate within a short period of time. It was this massive frenzy, especially in Florida due to the relocation. So you had Wall Street investors competing with retail investors, competing with just retail buyers, and it drove up the prices in such a short period of time that we just created a bubble. Absolutely. This is the biggest bubble, real estate bubble of all time that we're in right now. And as you can see, you just have to ask yourself, what happened to cause this type of drastic move upwards? It was just interest rates and migration patterns. And what's happening right now, migration has dropped 80% and interest rates have gone from 3% to 7%. Of course, that's going to drive purchases down because it's just no longer affordable for investors to be able to purchase.
Yeah,
Now,
there was a time when, so that 2021 period where you could not compete with Opendoor. And I remember being in appointments with sellers saying, we cannot get you this price in the marketplace. So if Opendoor is willing, so here's a something that they did that probably also contributed to the downfall, is that they were throwing money at people to try to gain market share.
yes,
And their offers were so high
yes,
that it made no sense. So
they're
we
overpaying.
told our sellers, if you can get this from Opendoor, you should do this. It went against every fiber in our being. But at the end of the day, when you look out for the consumer as a real estate consultant, it's like, yes, you should take that. It's cash close. Now, they got a little maybe too egotistical, too confident in their business model, throwing money at the marketplace to gain market share. And I think that that was a huge factor in contributing to low profitability, because eventually those homes sat. They couldn't sell for a profit. They purchased them from the seller at these high prices and then couldn't turn around and gain more from maybe a buyer that's not paying attention to pay those prices. The buyer started paying attention. The buyers knew this is getting a little too high, a little too inflated. It's a little too bubbly, and I don't think I'm going to pay that price. When we have seen a history now of Opendoor where they've had some of their flaws, where some of the homes a great flip, absolutely. But then when they're doing it so fast and they've got their subcontractors doing the work so fast, and you see the flaws in the cosmetic work and you see that it's possibly just lipstick on a pig, the buyer saw through that. And so you're seeing this big drop in. Opendoor couldn't squeeze any more profit out. They had already paid the max price to these sellers, and the sellers came out winners. But then that ended.
It ended very quickly. And it's not like the buyers can't see this data. That this is all published data, what Opendoor bought it for. So you can clearly see what they bought it for. Sometimes you can see the photos before Opendoor bought it, if it was listed on the market, so you can see the condition and what they upgraded and all this type of stuff. We're going to dig into how bad the Opendoor model is when that listing sits, because we came across some really interesting things that comes up specifically in Florida regarding what happens when a house flipper who has nobody on the ground paying attention to the property, what they actually look like in person. So look, the reality is that these business models are so bad. Zillow and Redfin both closed their home buying operations because they said it would put the whole company at risk. A year later, Redfin kind of did the same thing. It was called Redfin Now, and they pulled the plug. And in the memo to staff, he said Redfin stood to lose as much as $26 million in 2022, even before its overhead expenses. Despite it being a smaller loss than competitors, he said it was still larger than we could afford to bear. So these, Redfin and Zillow actually have legitimate business models by partnering with real estate agents, selling them leads and getting referral fees off of them. And they started doing the iBuying, and they realized that this would destroy their business model because it's too much capital. It's very expensive to operate. It's hard to manage these properties on the ground. And they tied up hundreds of millions of dollars in houses that you yourself wouldn't want to own right now, which is phenomenal, right? So it's really crappy. Now, the other thing that happened, Britt, was there were lawsuits against Opendoor. Get this, Opendoor had claimed that it used cutting edge technology to save consumers money, right? So that's their pitch. We're going to save you money, even though we all know the only reason they exist is to make money off of the consumer. The FTC said by submitting offers at market value and then reducing transaction costs compared to traditional home sale process, that they owned the title in the mortgage companies that they, or had partnerships with them that they were making additional money off of. And that's why they could reduce these costs, these selling costs. But that turned out to be deceptive, FTC said, because home sellers were misled into thinking that they could earn more money by selling with Opendoor than selling on the open market. So they got sued. In reality, most people who sold Opendoor made thousands of dollars less than they would have by selling their homes using traditional processes. This is from the FTC now saying this. So yes, the truth came out about it. So here's the big complaints about Opendoor that we see. A high volume of negative reviews highlight these issues. Lowball offers. Sellers hate lowball offers, right? They get offended. Sharp deductions for repair costs, right? So they would go through, they would think that cash offer was the only thing that would happen, and then immediately they'd get slapped with like, oh, your house needs $75,000 worth of upgrades. We're going to reduce it $75,000 plus $10,000, blah, blah, blah. And then the other complaint is when after Opendoor is closed, relisted the house, and the buyer buys it, their renovation quality was so bad. I mean,
ding, ding.
You would walk these houses, there would be cockroaches, there'd be cobwebs, the flooring would be all messed up. I mean, it looked horrible, Brittany. I don't know how many of these did you walk and what did it look like?
A lot. So one thing you can't get rid of when you are doing poor renovation and repairs is the smell. So we get it. When I remember so many Opendoor houses where they're trying to quickly turn these over, but you can't get rid of those smells that showed that either maybe someone was in a bad situation living in the house. That's why they had to sell to Opendoor. They had no other option. We know they had other options. They could have consulted some real estate advisors and figured out that they did. But when you're in a desperate situation like that, we get it. You're trying to find a way to get out with cash. Now, for the buyers, though, they're not wanting to touch these houses. It smells like history that we don't want to know what happened.
It smells stuffy in there, right? Because it rains here. There's
correct.
There's cockroaches.
Or someone left a window. The problem is there's not a property manager that is going and walking every time there's a showing to make sure that windows were closed or the AC wasn't turned off. It's
vacant, yes.
It's vacant, right? And so when someone does a showing, maybe the door was accidentally left open and now you've got moisture coming in and you've got bugs coming in. And so quality control was not really, they could say that was on their priority list, but they didn't have good QC.
I hope.
And so immediately buyers are going to get deterred being like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on with this, but I don't think I want to take this on.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this and you're an Opendoor investor, I mean, I think you should take this to heart because it is not, flipping a home in Florida with a vacant house is not simple. And by the way, they didn't like stage the house. No. They were doing as little as humanly possible.
We're talking all agreeable gray carpets. It was apartment grade to make sure that we can just push these out. And an unsuspecting buyer will say, wow, this looks like a new house. This is great. I'm paying these premium prices, but it's like someone made it new for me. False.
Yeah, it was not. It was poor quality. Yeah. So how realtors use Opendoor, we get the sellers to be realistic about the price. So a lot of our agents, they would just submit their listing to Opendoor just to get their seller to be like, oh, this is what you can get for a cash offer, is generally 10 to 20% less than market value. And that's when you combine the fees in, because some of the fees were 6%. It was dependent on price point. They would charge you different fees. So if it's like a lower price point, it would sell faster. They would charge you less of a fee. If it needed more rehab, they would charge you more of a fee. They're trying to make their money on the buy as much as humanly possible and then flip it as soon as possible and then renegotiate you. But that's how we used it. And it worked, by the way. Sellers were like, oh, to get them realistic with price, because they thought Opendoor were competitive offers the way that they advertised, that this was where it should be.
Right.
So here's my opinion, okay? And all this is opinion. The business model is basically finding the dumbest seller possible who has to move and then giving them an offer and they don't understand what's happening. Our opinion is it relies on finding uneducated sellers who don't understand their options, right? You want to have all available options. Your largest purchase of your house, usually your largest sale is your house as well. So you want to have all options available to you based on what needs to happen. Sometimes local end buyers will pay more. It's best to always get the property on the MLS first with a top agent. Now, 71% of agents did not sell a single house last year in 2020. So I cannot emphasize as much. You need a top professional real estate agent who does this every single day and is obsessed, just like the agents are here at Momentum Realty. You need an obsessed agent who loves what they do and loves serving clients and getting them the most amount of money possible. When they do that, you're going to send them referrals. And that's how we operate our business. That's how the people around us operate their businesses. And how do you do that? You need to interview. You need to call. You need to look at reviews. You need to look at the number of transactions. There's no more hiring your friend or your cousin or your aunt or any of that type of stuff. You need to start focusing, especially in this market where the market shifted to a down market. You need the best of the best to be able to sell your house for the highest price. It can make a difference of, I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars hiring bad agents versus good agents. So you need to be really careful of who you hire.
And the best of the best may actually show you that you have other options available because they're connected within the community to know that they can bring you cash offers. They can do some seller financing options. They are giving you options. That's not just maybe a one size fits all solution.
Exactly. So let's finish this off with the main reasons why I personally hate Opendoor is exactly
I
what
have
we
my
already
own.
talked about. Horrible construction and repairs. Number two, if there's a problem, there's no one to call. You can't even get anybody
Inside. You can't even get inside because sometimes the batteries on the thing would
on the
break and
lockbox.
then you
Yeah.
couldn't call the corporate office because no one would pick up. I remember sitting in driveways for over an hour and then we eventually just left the showing. It was horrible.
Yep. And then that brings me to the third one where you're sitting in that driveway, the grass dies because a lot of these houses either don't have irrigation or they turn the irrigation off or the irrigation's broken. So if it's in the summer months, you would come up to a house and all the neighbors would be pissed. The HOA would be pissed because the grass would be completely brown. Everything else would look beautiful on the street. So the neighbors got upset because
Hmm.
by the way, when they sell for those lower prices in your neighborhood to Opendoor, the neighbors would get upset and say you're ruining the comps in our neighborhood. I remember people were calling me like, why did they do that? How could they sell it for that? I had other listings in the neighborhood and they'd find that one be the next comp. It would mess up their appraisal. And it was because Opendoor was paying less than market value on a
Yes,
lot
I
of these houses.
remember.
They get
I'll give one
angry.
shout out. Yes, I'll give one shout out to Kimberly. I'm not going to say her last name, but she would call us probably once a week, being like, there's another open door listing on the street. Like, I can't believe this. And she would say, Britt, what are those sellers thinking? And I'm
Yes.
like, girl, they already signed their life away. We can't do anything for them. But she's like, what were they thinking? They got trapped. Like, they had so many other options and they sold to Open Door for less.
Yes, they sold for
And
less.
she would call us like once a week for maybe a half a year.
I get it. I mean, if you want it to be more convenient, you don't want the showings, all this kind of stuff. I mean, that makes sense, but there's other ways to do it. You can have a mega open house your first weekend and just leave that open house. I mean, the market was so hot by then. By the end of the weekend, you'd have 12 offers, right? Leave
Yes.
town for a week. We have 100 different ways that we could set it up for you to just be gone for 2 hours, and we can take care and get everybody in there who wants to see it at that exact time. So I don't think like it actually provides a tremendous amount of value. Most people do not spend 24/7 at their house working and have to be there. So I
Right.
don't see value in this company at all. I think it will
Well,
be acquired. And the only thing I do like, I will say this. So let me finish on this, Britt, and then I'll get to your comment. So
cool.
completely reliant on financing costs and hold time. So if just like all flippers, it mostly only works during boom periods where there's a limited supply and high demand from buyers. Going into a slower market is very bad for their business models. Even professional flippers who have been around, 10 to 15 years here in Jacksonville, who are at peak of the market, they're shutting down their entire operations, 30, 40 people, and they're just going, bare bones, referral based, foreclosure auction, all that kind of stuff. The margins are simply too thin for these flips to really happen, and the cost of capital is higher now than it was before, and the sales price is unknown. So it's really market dependent. That's one of the reasons why I hate the business model.
So, in addition, Opendoor may have been first to market, which scared everybody because they were one of the first to market with this kind of technology that revolutionized how we see the real estate market, right? And what's possible for consumers. But now that we've come, let's say, 4 to 5 years in the future with technology and advancements and consumers being smarter and more intelligent about what's possible for them, this doesn't have to be the only option for you. People can recreate this. You can get a digital lockbox. You can have people submit their driver's licenses. You can do a similar situation for yourself and work with a lending fund or a financier that can help purchase and get you cash offers. There are so many ways now and so many products available if people just search a little bit or work with an advisor that can help them find these options. So it doesn't have to be this anymore. But I understand why they were the first to the market with this. So we were really thrown off. And now that doesn't have to be the only solution.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, we provide cash offers as a company now as well, and our real estate agents can provide you a cash offer through us. We are honest with you. We're going to tell you it's going to be a lot less than what you could get on the open market. But if you need to move fast and you need a cash offer, we can do it too. That's not a problem, regardless of whatever the price point is. So it's something to think
Absolutely.
about. There's no competitive edge here. So here's the thing that I thought I liked about it. And I know, Brittany, you had challenges when the lockbox didn't work, but when it did work, it actually kind of was cool that buyers could go show themselves houses. Of course, yes, they have the cockroaches, the cobwebs, and the bad paint jobs, whatever, but I liked the idea of a consumer being able to upload a credit card. They can go into any of their houses. They have to lock up. They have to put their driver's license in there. I mean, that saves a tremendous amount of time from agents walking around. The problem is a lot of consumers don't know what to look for and what the red flags could be in a house where it's like, oh, there's like step ladder cracks here and they're like wider than the side of a nickel, right? There's like
Right.
things that are like really concerning that are specific to Florida. And if you have a lot of people relocating here from out of town, they don't know the Florida specific type of issues that we have. So the one thing I liked about Open Door, I think is actually a bad thing for the buyer.
So I'm going to say that the one thing I like about Open Door still ended up being a bad thing for Open Door. They thought that the consumer would do everything themselves. Whether that was intentional to try to trick them, I don't think that they were going in with the intention of trickery or, deception. I really think that they were trying to do a quick fix solution for a consumer. But here's what I'm getting at. The consumer would go into these homes, show themselves the home, exactly to your pro of why we like Open Door. It saved time for the agent. But I think Open Door thought that they could erase agents through this solution, and it didn't work because the buyer would go in and still not know what they're looking at or what could be a misconception of what they think something is redone or a repair or what to look out for. So there was still fear from the consumer of not having a hand to hold through the process. So where Open Doors, like we've given the consumer a solution for a quick fix, the buyer still said, I'm going to go back to my real estate agent and present this house to them. I may have seen it without them and saved my agent time, but I didn't save Open Door money because now I'm going to go write the offer up and include commission for my agent to walk me through the process. And now Open Door, you're still out commission.
Yes, buyers have so many questions when you walk them through houses. Like, can I take this wall down? What kind
Yeah.
of flooring is this?
What's the permits? What's the age of the
Yeah,
roof? What's all this
what's the
stuff?
age of the HVAC? What's the roof? These windows look messed up. This is sloped back here in the yard? Is this going to be a water problem? They have
Mm-hmm.
so many questions. Where are they going to go? Because Open Door is not answering their phone. They don't have a call center. They think they had like one guy for the whole Florida region, and he was like out of Atlanta, Georgia, on a 1-800 number that never
Yes.
answered. It was horrible, horrible experience, horrible consumer experience. So while they might make it more convenient by charging a massive fee for the seller, it was inconvenient for any sort of buyer other than walking into the house.
Correct.
That was pretty much the only thing
And
I
there
liked.
were buyers that decided to do it themselves, but I don't think it was at the level that we thought it would be. And buyers still went to their agents to help them with the process of buying an Open Door house.
Exactly. So I want to know what you think. Did you ever use Open Door to sell your house or buy a house? Were you part of the lawsuit? Are they the worst flipping? I like to call them the biggest flopping company out there because this was the greatest flop of all time. And I'd love to hear if you had any horror stories. If you're an agent and showed one of their houses, anything that happened, comment below. And look, you can subscribe to my Substack. It has about 27,000 followers. The link will be down below. And I talk about things there that I can't talk about here on YouTube. So definitely give us a subscribe and you'll get notice of any of these YouTube videos that we put out here. So Brittany, any last thoughts before we get off here?
Just remember there are so many options to you if you ask your trusted advisors, and it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. That's my comment.
And contact us if you need relationships to be able to find the best of the best in your market, because it can make a night and day difference between your real estate experience. Again, the majority, bottom 80% of agents are horrible. They're not going to take good care of you. Even some of the top 10% agents are pretty bad, to be honest with you. We know the ones that are good at communicating and actually know their stuff and know their product of real estate. They understand what it is and how to fix things and the cost of things. It makes a huge difference for you and your experience.
It should be a value add, not a value detractor.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for following. See you next week.